My name is Ethan, and all my life I've had two voices guiding me. One was mine, hesitant, doubting, clumsy. The other belonged to my dog. He didn't speak, not with words, but he had a way of telling me things, a raw instinct that felt older than language itself. Flint didn't talk, but he always warned. And early on, I learned to listen. Dad was gone most of the time, swallowed up by business trips that lasted weeks. The house felt too empty, like a stage stripped of actors. One summer, after endless begging and promises I knew I'd never keep, Mom finally gave in. We drove to the Pound, a squat concrete building that stank of bleach, rusted iron, and sorrow. Rows of cages lined the halls, each dog barking itself hoarse, voices blending into a hopeless choir. I was about to lose heart when I saw him. In the furthest corner pen, pressed against a cracked wall, was a gray, trembling dog. He didn't bark, didn't move. His ribs showed like shadows under thin fur. His paws were too large for his body. His head hung low. When he finally lifted it, I saw his eyes, amber, clouded, but burning with a faint, stubborn glow, like an ember that refuses to die. "Flint," I whispered, without even thinking. When the cage opened, he stumbled out and pressed his nose to my cheek, as though he'd been waiting for me all along. From that moment, we belonged to each other. For almost a year, nothing strange happened. Flint grew into himself. Broad shoulders, thick fur like smoke, strong legs, a steady gait. He became the rhythm of my nights, the click of claws on hardwood, the heavy sigh by my bed, the presence that made darkness bearable. And then, one night, someone knocked. Mom was in the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon pie thick in the air. I padded to the door and peered through frosted glass. An old man stood outside, stooped shoulders, gray hair, a smile too eager. I slipped the chain. Flint lunged before I could even breathe. He hit the door, forcing it open, and hurled himself at the man, tearing into his face. Blood splattered the porch steps. The sound of wet flesh ripping filled the air. I screamed, pulling at Flint's collar, but he was locked in, all muscle and fury. His growls weren't just animal, they sounded almost human, vibrating with a rage I didn't understand. A patrol car screeched to a stop by the curb, red and blue lights cutting through the night. A police officer jumped out, gun already raised. "Move, kid," he shouted, but I couldn't. Flint was mine, my only constant. I stood between them, chest heaving, eyes burning. The officer cursed, kicked Flint off. My dog yelped, a sharp, broken sound that cut me in half. Then, silence. On the porch boards lay something small and pale. An ear. I stared, stomach twisting. Then I looked up. The old man's face was torn and bloody, yet his head still carried two perfect ears. The officer froze. Our eyes met, sharing confusion, fear, something wordless. The man bolted, surprisingly fast. The cop lunged after him, pinned him against a garage wall, cuffs snapping shut. Flint pressed against my legs, muzzle dripping red. A week later, the news confirmed the nightmare. The man had been stealing children, collecting them in pieces, and my dog had known. Time moved on, though the memory burned deep. Flint and I spent afternoons in Lincoln Park among joggers, mothers with strollers, teenagers hunched over phones. And always, in the far corner, sat the same woman. Mid-40s, sharp beauty, too polished for a public park. She smiled each time, her eyes lingering too long. "Hello," she'd call sweetly. "Flint." And Flint would lower his head, lips curling, a growl rumbling like distant thunder. "Quiet," I'd mutter, embarrassed. "She's harmless." But the next day she was gone. Flint dragged me to her bench, claws gouging dirt. He dug furiously, earth spraying. I tried to stop him, but then I saw it. A pale arc, too smooth, too perfect. Bone. The police sealed the scene. Weeks later, I read the news. The woman had murdered her family and buried them beneath that very bench. Flint had known again. Years passed. Flint aged. His muzzle turned gray, his eyes filmed over with cataracts. His steps grew slow and heavy. 13 years old, every movement borrowed from a body ready to give up. And then came Cassidy. She was light where the world was dim, beautiful, kind, unshakably calm. She volunteered at a children's hospice, sitting with dying kids so they wouldn't pass alone. She never bragged about it, never framed herself as a saint. It was just something she did. I fell hard. Within months, I proposed. She said yes, eyes shining with tears. I brought her home to meet my parents. Mom hugged her tight. Dad smiled warmly, and then their faces shifted. They told me Flint wouldn't last the week. The vet was coming in the morning. They wanted him to pass at home. I felt the air leave me. Cassidy squeezed my hand. "I'm here," she whispered. We went into the guest room. Flint lay on his blanket, ribs rising shallowly, his breath rasping like wind through dry leaves. I dropped to the floor, pressed my forehead to his skull, whispered everything I'd never said aloud, how he made me brave, how he made me whole, how I wasn't ready to live without him. His eyes flickered open, clouded but alive. His tail thumped once, weak but certain. He pushed his nose into my chest, and for a moment he was young again. Behind me, the floorboard creaked. Cassidy stood in the doorway, soft in the lamplight. She smiled gently, stepped closer, and knelt beside me. Flint turned his head. His fur bristled. A growl began deep inside him, faint but undeniable. "Easy," I whispered. "He can't see well anymore." Cassidy's voice was calm. "Of course. Dogs confuse shadows." She set her bag down. A faint scent leaked out. Alcohol. Sharp. Sterile. Something small rolled across the floor, stopping against my shoe. A vial. The label caught the light. Before the word vanished under the fold. Flint stiffened. With a sudden jerk, he swiped his paw, shattering the vial against the dresser. The air filled with the heavy hospital stench of sedatives. Cassidy gasped softly, gathering shards with practiced ease. "It's for me," she said quickly. "Flying makes me panic. It helps with my anxiety." Her eyes met mine, steady, almost too steady. Flint dragged himself forward, placing his frail body between us. His cloudy eyes burned white in the lamplight. The growl deepened, vibrating the floorboards. Cassidy reached out, stroking his muzzle. "Shh, it's okay." And Flint, my dying dog, lifted his head and licked a wrist, slowly, deliberately, right over the vein. Cassidy flinched, just slightly. Her smile cracked for half a second, long enough for me to glimpse something underneath. Not cruelty, not kindness. Something else. Something patient. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The air was heavy, the silence unnatural. I went to the kitchen for water, but stopped when I heard a sound from the guest room. A whisper. I crept closer. Cassidy sat cross-legged beside Flint, stroking his fur, her voice low and soothing, almost like a lullaby. But the words weren't for me. You always see, don't you? That's the trouble, loyal, protective, but inconvenient. She kissed his forehead softly, like a nurse saying goodbye. Flint's cloudy eyes lifted, finding me in the doorway. He let out one last growl. Not at her, not at anyone, just into the room itself. A warning. A farewell. Cassidy looked up, catching my silhouette in the dark hall. She smiled, perfect, warm, tender. "Oh," she said quietly, "you're awake." And in that moment I realized I might never again know if the monsters in my life were outside the door or already inside it.